What is up, Sopranos fans? Kino here. A little while back, I released a video discussing if the Sopranos were a true mob family or just a glorified crew. I'll link that in the description if you haven't seen it. However, while I was making that video, a question came up for me about the Lupertazzis family. I thought about exploring the idea in that video, but ultimately I had to cut it due to it not really fitting with the main topic. So instead, I decided to just split it off here into its own video. So consider this a bit of an amendum. Not exactly a full video, but something I've been interested in exploring. My question is, if the Lupertazzis are supposed to be one of the 5 families of New York, which family are they supposed to be? Now, you might think that's a dumb question. They're their own family, and in this universe, one of the 5 families is just called the Lupertazzi family. But as I'll explain, that doesn't exactly work. In the last video, I explained briefly about how the modern American Mafia was established primarily by Charles Luciano. In Season 1, Meadow actually states this history as well.
Salvatore Lucana, better known as Charlie Lucky Luciano, who organized the 5 families. Lucchese, Gambino, Bonanno, Profaci.
These would become the modern 5 families we have today, and all of the 5 families are further referenced in the show. In the episode 46 long, we see an interview with Vincent Rizzo, a former Genovese soldier.
Vincent Rizzo.
Yes.
Former soldier in the Genovese family, government witness turned best-selling author.
Also, in The Many Saints of Newark, Dickie mentions that his dad knew Vito Genovese.
I don't get it. When I was a kid, you and Vito Genovese, you always praised Mussolini.
Let's not talk politics at the table.
In the pilot episode, Henry Hill, who is an associate of the Lucchese crime family, as well as the movie Goodfellas, is mentioned.
I'll fucking kill you.
What are you gonna do, go Henry Hill on me now? How many mobsters are selling screenplays and screwing everything up?
John Gotti, Sammy the Bull, Albert Anastasia, and Paul Castellano, all Gambino figures, are mentioned in the show as well.
Did you ever meet John Gotti?
That's what they said about Gravano.
Even rival families settle their differences amicably.
Oh, yeah. I remember that picture of Albert Anastasia lying there all amicable on the barbershop floor.
You're smart to have reservations, but there's differences between this and Castellano.
In Season 6, Paulie says he barely survived the Colombo Wars.
I lived through the 70s by the skin of my nuts when the Colombos were going at it.
Also, Junior references Old Man Profaci, the original boss of the Colombo family.
Old man Profaci knew how to split his enemies.
In Season 6, Eugene cites Joe Bonanno's retirement as precedent for his own.
Well, I thought about that. And there was Joe Bananas.
Come on.
Also, Joe Massino, a Bonanno boss who turned informant, is referenced by the FBI.
This recent case against Joe Massino in New York, that was 7 years before indictments were handed down.
So we see that all of the 5 families have been mentioned, establishing that they exist in the canon of the show. But this creates a problem. If all 5 families exist, which family are the Lupertazzis supposed to be? Well, maybe one of the 5 families was renamed after Carmine Sr. took over. After all, most of the real-life families were originally named something else to begin with anyway. There's only one problem with that idea. Carmine is said to be one of the oldest reigning bosses in the Mafia.
In New York, the only old-style boss still in place is Carmine Lupertazzi.
This is corroborated by the character of Angelo Gareppi. Angelo is stated to have been Carmine's consigliere for over 30 years.
You were Carmine's consigliere for over 30 years. It wasn't for that little construction beef down in Yonkers. It'd be you running that family today.
However, he was also in prison since the 80s, as he was released as part of the same wave as Phil Leotardo and Tony Blundetto.
He'll soon be rejoined by Angelo Gareppi, his former consigliere.
Now, I'm not an expert on real-life Mafia history, like so many of my commenters claim to be, but it seems unlikely that Angelo could continue to be consigliere while he's in prison. So that would mean Carmine was the boss of the family since at least the 50s for this timeline to work. This is further reinforced by the fact that Carmine was stated to have invented point shaving, and was involved in a real-life 1951 CCNY cheating scandal.
My cousin told me it was Carmine who invented point shaving.
CCNY versus Kentucky, 1951. Nobody beat the spread.
His position as boss all this time eliminates most of the families, since most of the references occur after Carmine would have already been boss. If I had to pick, I would say that the Lucchese's are the best option, as they only really have the Henry Hill reference, and maybe that can be explained as having happened underneath Carmine. The real explanation, of course, is that the writers wanted to have an original family that the New Jersey crew could interact with, and didn't think too much about the established history. After all, the Lupertazzis themselves weren't even mentioned at all until season 3, meaning that they likely weren't thought of in the early seasons when these references were made. However, what about the other families? Do we ever meet any of the members of the other 4 families? Well, in season 1, Johnny Sack was originally said to be an emissary of 2 other families.
That he, de facto, controlled Joe Capos, with the backing of 2 of the New York families, communicating through their emissary, John Sacramone.
This was before the Lupertazzis were invented, so it's possible that this was retconned. The FBI specifically mentioned 2 mob figures that they're interested in, Mangano and Teresi.
We want Johnny Sack, but more than him, we want Mangano and Teresi.
I want to fuck Angie Dickinson. See who gets lucky first.
These are presumably the bosses of the other 2 families he's said to represent. Also, later Johnny Sack mentions that his brother-in-law is one of the bosses of the other families.
Yes, you still got the 4 other families who could raise a stink. But Andy's my brother-in-law. I have their ear.
Note that this Andy he references is not Ginny's brother who we see in season 6. This is presumably either the aforementioned Mangano or Teresi, who don't appear physically on the show. Now, Mangano and Teresi might actually be bosses of the same family. Tony mentions that 3 of the other families have multiple bosses.
Hey, this way you're not such a big target for the feds. 3 of the other families have this kind of arrangement.
This would also fit Johnny's description of representing 2 families. He would represent the Lupertazzis as the underboss, and this other family due to his connections. Now, there is a 3rd family we see on the show. In the series finale Made in America, Tony reaches out to George Paglieri to set up a meeting with Butchie. George is a neutral party, since he isn't a member of the Lupertazzi family.
You're not part of that family. You're basically retired, everybody trusts you.
Now, it says on the Sopranos wiki that George is the boss or former boss of his own family. However, while Tony says that he isn't a part of the Lupertazzis, I see no direct mention of him being a boss of a family. The only evidence I can think of this is the fact that since Tony approached him to set up the meeting, he must be a respected figure.
Go ahead, Carmine. George was good enough to broker this meeting for us. You're just gonna sit there?
So we'll go ahead and assume for now that this is another family. That brings us up to 3. We have the Lupertazzis, the Mangano/Teresi family, and the Paglieri family. These are the only 5 families we see on the show. However, there is a spattering of other smaller families and crews that we do see. There's the Naples-based Vittorio family that Tony visits in season 2. There are the Atwell Avenue boys in Rhode Island that Tony almost hires to kill Johnny Sack. There is the unnamed New England crew which Dickie supposedly fought. And depending on who you ask, the DeMeos themselves may or may not be a family.
5 fucking families, and we got this other pygmy thing over in Jersey.
Anyway, that's the video. Again, no real purpose or conclusion. I just found it interesting to explore the canon of the show. But I need something memorable to end the video with. Oh, I got it. I'll use the classic Sopranos quote. Those always go over great. But what to choose?
You Parmesan sandwich. Fuck you.
Ah, perfect. Patrons, we are a family. And even in this fucked up day and age, that means something. Russell, Sean, Heart of Markness, Logan, Clean, John Reyna, Jesse Sterling, Andrew Stewart, Ops Gracing Media, Daz J. Kit, Conan Higgins, Sam Cedarlin, Don Lucania, Celery Man, and Jenna Marie Johnson.